All right, welcome everybody. Today we got our friend Jack Pitts on today from out there in the East Coast. He's over there at the Jersey Shore at the Summer Beach House. With all those all those New Yorkers and East Coast people out here. So welcome back, Jack. How you doing, my friend?
Good to see you. As much as I love to be at the beach and on the East Coast, I'm still always jealous of the California people.
Talking to you from California, it's good to see you as well. And today we're going to talk everything about what's going on with the Craig Wright Copa appeal. Sounds like you might have some inside information. Some of it you can share, possibly with the audience, and also what's going on with BSV. I mean, ultimately, in your investment, with your investment mind and where things are going, and the whole industry itself. So yeah, let's get started with the hot topic, which is the Copa case. I mean, we saw that article that Artie Van Pelt had put out, saying that Craig Wright didn't file the appeal. I had a big space talking about it, and what are your thoughts on what you know so far about this Craig Wright Copa appeal?
Um, well, I mean, first of all, Craig has revealed on his private Slack that he filed the appeal paperwork on time. I would add to that I think if people knew what went into an appeal in terms of the amount of work involved, you don't just wait 21 days and then fill out a little form that says I want to appeal. You have significant amounts of work to do before that. That's why they allow you the 21 days so you can read the judge's written report and respond to it. So you're not just gonna uh, do a bunch of work, I think, in creating an appeal and then not file it. So I would say whatever the reason is, it's not showing up to people. Is probably it's probably actually fortuitous because it just shows how much people will doubt every single word out of this guy's mouth, and they're just building this narrative of liar, liar, pants on fire, and it's so over the top that it's actually not believable, really. I mean, I think the way they get away with it is people don't pay complete attention to it, so they only catch wisps of it. But if they were in our shoes and saw the amount of full court press that they spend on BSV and Craig Wright, your first thought would be, well, why would they spend all this time? We're the number 97th ranked crypto. We haven't been in the top 10 since for 3 years. Craig Wright, to their own narrative, is a complete joke, fraud, not believable character in their narrative. And if that were actually true, that he wasn't believable, then they wouldn't pay any attention. I mean, I remember when I first came on Twitter about this Bitcoin stuff in 2018 and 19, there was at least three or four characters on there that were claiming that they're Satoshi. I think I've probably blocked them all. They're probably still around, but they actually will run around saying stuff and trying to like inject things in there that sound semi-believable. And you kind of give them some credit and watch their account for a while and see what they say. And then when they kind of back away from it, saying anything truly committal, and putting at their stones on the anvil, so to say, you realize that they're just full of it, and no one takes them seriously, right? That they usually have a decent following, but not really super important. And the really telling thing is that people like in BTC Core, they don't take them seriously. They don't even respond to those people, but they respond to Craig Wright. So what's the difference? And they claim that, this is, I think, is the biggest thing in the case. The biggest thing in the case is the contradiction of BTC not only wants you to believe that Craig forged all these documents, that would be one thing, but they want you to believe that he's done it stupidly, like poorly. Like this guy is not even just a good con man or shyster. He's like a bad cheesy, like screws everything up, techno babble, never has said a correct thing in his entire life. All his accreditations are baloney. All the colleges that he went to, everybody who went there and got their degrees should just give up in life because they're not real degrees. Meanwhile, he has degrees from like, I don't know, 20 different universities, some of which are highly respectable and some of which are just less known because they're regional. But like, it's a real insult to a lot of people. So it's not just like you're attacking one crackpot. It's like, oh, okay, so all these professionals that Craig knows that vouch for him, his uncle, who's a decorated war veteran, his family members are all implicated. I mean, it's just not believable, right? That you would sink that many people around you to continue to do something where you have an outcome that is almost zero. So Craig's upside, people think, oh, well, Craig's got this multi-billion dollar, tens of billions of dollars of upside if he wins. He really doesn't. And he's told you that. He has basically committed the entirety of the BTC holdings in the Tulip Trust or anything else that he recovers. I think he said something like 99 point something % of it he's giving to charity and will not benefit him or anybody he knows personally. Now, he's made that pledge. I remember he made that pledge at first in 2021 when the Kleiman case was about to come to a head. He made it again in court on, I think, either the first day or in the first week when they asked him what his motives were for this case. And he stated outright, I will not take credit for all this BTC that may or may not come my way if I win this case. And the reason is really simple. If you're an honest person and let's say I have a bunch of gold bricks in this closet behind me, and I also have a bunch of fool's gold, which is just red cinder block bricks that are painted gold. They look like gold bars. And I said, well, the market's, and I run around going, well, the market's really stupid because let me show you this cinder block brick that's painted in fake gold paint. And people believe this is gold, and this is worth $74,000, this brick here. And then I bring the real gold out and I go, this is worth $32 a brick. And I say to you, Scout's honor, this brick here that's $32 a brick is the real gold. If you cut into it, you'll find the element AU, 99 point whatever % of it is pure gold. But this one, if I crack it a little bit, you'll see the cinder block underneath. But there's a bunch of fools that think that this cinder block is worth $74,000 a cinder block. And I can go and sell those cinder blocks. Well, who am I going to sell them to? I got to sell them to a bunch of suckers, like literally suckers. And so a good businessman would never do that because you would tarnish your reputation. But what you might do is say, well, look, since you idiots, I've told you time and time again for years that this fake gold isn't real, I will sell it on the open market. And what I'll do with it is I'll take the proceeds and give it to the needy or give it to some people who want to fight for microtransactions or however he wants to do it, which I'm sure will be quite clever. But that's not a benefit to him. So what is he really betting on? Well, the only monetary benefit he would get if he wins this case is BSV. And he would hold, let's say he holds 1 million of that, right? Well, 1 million BSV times whatever, $30 is 30 million. That's barely going to get him through all these court cases. I don't even think it will cover all the court cases that he's been involved in. So that's a wash. That just means the BSV that he has, if it were, worth something, means he could pay for his legal bills. Now, he would have upside there, right? If he hodled the BSV or whatever. And that's true, but that's betting on yourself, right? That's saying, okay, we're all square. I paid $30 million in legal fees to protect my Bitcoin. And now my Bitcoin's only worth 30, so maybe it goes up. But I'm now relying on the fact that the fundamentals of BSV, the transaction volumes will go up. People will store their information in the immutable ledger and all these things. So he's betting on himself, which is more akin to just betting on your own startup that hasn't made a profit yet, right? So that's his upside. His upside is somewhere between 0 and whatever he can help real Bitcoin generate, which is all on, his shoulders plus the people in the ecosystem that help it along. And that's a great bet, but it's a really bad one because what's the downside? The downside is 340-year prison sentence. And they've literally stated that with multiple sentences at 20 or whatever the heck it is, 40 years times the amount of forgery that they claim he's done, when they recommended him to the, whatever they call it in England, the CPW court or whatever it's called, to recommend you for criminal action, the downside there is like several life sentences, or it's a Ross Ulbricht sentence. And so, I mean, I'm a gambling man in terms of like sports betting and odds. And of course, I'm a stock picker research guy. So I always know my odds. And what you want is a high probability of success north of 50%, and then odds that are better than even, so if you can get 10-to-1 odds, which is like a long shot horse, but you think the horse has a 50% chance of winning, which is a coin flip, well, you want to make as many bets like that as you can, right? That's an amazing bet. Well, this bet is more like you're betting on something that's worse than a coin flick. So maybe you roll a die, and if Craig rolls a 1 or a 2, then he gets to continue his research and maybe BSV turns into something. But if he rolls a 3, 4, 5, or 6, 340 years of prison, he never sees his wife and kids again, and he doesn't have access to his books and his research and all the things that make him happy. So that is an awful bet, like the world's worst. So why would any criminal bet on that?
I mean, how? So is that the bet that Craig is making? I mean, by pursuing this case, is you're
Absolutely.
saying from the outset? I mean, he had to have known that this was a potential outcome, and he decided to move.
I know what it was, Gavin. It wasn't that he will pledge 99% of the BTC sales to charity. I think that's the way he phrased it originally. And he didn't really state, well, that's weird. Why not just make it 100, or, why not just keep all of it? And I think the 1% was maybe fine-tuned later when he said it in court, which was a little more precise. And what he said in court was, and this is just a couple months ago, he said, the only part of the BTC sales that I would use is to pay my court costs. So in other words, he would use the BTC sales to pay the amount of money that cost his own pocket. And it is all financed by him. I know the judge doesn't want to believe that either, but it is all financed by his own assets. And he would only take the amount that costs to fight, which shouldn't happen, right? If everybody was reasonable. And then after that, it all goes to charity. So now you tell me what his incentive structure is. So I would argue that COPA isn't arguing strongly enough. They're saying, A, he's a serial forger. Okay, so you're a criminal. Hopefully you have a big upside, right? Like CZ and Tether Boys, they have 100 billion at stake, right? That's a big number. That makes you in the top 5 for richest men in the world. So I get that, right? They're willing to commit a little crime and bend some rules to be really, really stinking rich, okay? So that makes sense, but Craig doesn't have that. So number 2, they have to argue that he's stupid. So all the forgeries that have been done that I say are not him, that are people like the Krishnagar Hansens of the world and his henchmen, or the Gregory Maxwells of the world and his henchmen, that have planted these things in his old documents. I say that he is not of the ilk, or he has so much experience in digital forensics and being a witness in court trials and all these things, and plus just all the degrees and certifications that are off the charts, that he just wouldn't make simple mistakes. You might make a really complex mistake and be like, wow, even the best guy got caught on that one. And he has. I think he has made big mistakes that have been kind of subtle. One of them just being, somebody let Christian Auger Hansen, the wolf, into the hen house, and the guy was able to tap, some computers inside Nchain. So that was pretty elaborate, right? So you can almost imagine someone falling for that one. He just, believed that Christian Auger Hansen was an honest person for whatever reason. But like, these are simple mistakes, like almost like when you're trying to doctor your driver's license in the 70s and they're not even laminated, and you just kind of write the number in. You turn the 7 into an 8 by putting a little S into it. It's like, that's the level of forgery that's going on for some of these things they claim is backdated and all this. It's so obvious that like a 17-year-old trying to doctor his license, to drink or something, even they wouldn't do it. Right? So it's egregious what they're trying to argue for. But then the third part is, okay, so you're not only arguing that you're evil and do forgeries, but you're really bad at them and you're a pathetic forgery artist. But now what they should be arguing is that he's crazy on top of it, like completely certifiably insane, should be put in a mental institution in a straitjacket with a sucker in his mouth so he doesn't bite his own tongue and hurt himself. Because that's essentially what would make the most sense. Because that I could believe. If someone was like, well, you haven't met Craig, he's, completely insane and does things that you can't even believe. So
dangerous.
This is par for the course.
He's dangerous.
Right? Nobody's seen that. Nobody's seen him do absolutely insane, other than the little sword exercise, which is just kind of normal, showmanship. But like, he doesn't. People don't have a lot of stories where like, well, then Craig, decided to jump off the 4th story onto some concrete and try and land in his dancing shoes. He's not nuts. He's far from nuts. He's actually a little too serious, and it just doesn't add up. So I think you don't even need any Bitcoin knowledge. You don't need any historical knowledge of Satoshi. You don't need anything to get a really strong sense that the only reason this guy would do this is that it's the truth, because there's nothing in it for him. I mean, it's just a dude that wants his baby back. Like, hey, that's my file format. That's my database that you copied. Like, I gave it to you as open source. That's the most evil thing, is Craig gives Bitcoin to people as open source and literally basically gives them an avenue to compete. Like, all you jesters couldn't come up with a good digital cash system, but here you go. You can copy, you can press one button. I don't know how much coding you've done, but like, when you go to GitHub and you like someone else's work and it's open source, you can hit one button and downloads all the code into your computer. You can rename it, right? Rename it Pitt's coin or Gavin coin. And as long as you keep the little copyright thing in there, it says designed by Satoshi Nakamoto, you can go sell that. And like the Lee brothers did with the Litecoin, you can make yourself into a billionaire doing that and changing two numbers. And
Charlie Lee did that. Yeah.
Charlie Lee did that. Actually, a ton of them have done it, right? Like even Ethereum is a complete copy of Bitcoin. They just added in some like looping, right? Which wasn't needed. But Vitalik thought it was needed because he doesn't understand that Bitcoin's Turing complete. I get it. He's a young kid, but like, and he's not really much of a hardcore original coder. He's just kind of a guy who looks like a coder, so people believe him. But like, he didn't understand it either. But he copied all the opcodes. Go look at the Ethereum opcodes. They're the same words. He doesn't even change the lingo. It's like op or and op, false and op true. It's all the same stuff. Right in Ethereum. So even they copied it. But that's all you had to do is rename it, change a few things if you like or whatever. It's open source. And with all that generosity, they said, nah, we're just going to take your Bitcoin and do what we want with it. And we're going to fire the guy that you hired to babysit it, that you trusted the most. we're gonna not only fire him, but we're gonna gang up on him, get him to give us some like repository passwords to get into the code, and then we're gonna kick him out. We're gonna vote him off the island. This is a real coup. And
Yeah.
to think, if you're like, if someone did this to, let's say, your podcast, or someone did this to Slicktionary or something, I would be way more pissed than he is. Like, people go, oh, he gets really angry and he says he wants to eat their lunch or whatever, and powerful words. I mean, I would be 10 times worse. I would be a stark raving lunatic. I would fit their new narrative that I'm a crazy, because I would just be highly insensitive. I think he's been incredibly calm through it all and reserved, and he does, tend to put things in the proper channels, right? Like when he does get a little heated, it's usually in like his own private channel. He doesn't generally, he's a little more reserved and respectful on the social media sites until people aren't respectful back, and then anything can happen. But that's the same with me. I fire off a few nasty grams at people on social media when they act like an asshole.
So, so it sounds like we can put to bed the idea that the appeal is not going forward. It's going forward. I'm going to make the statement that it is going forward and it's happening. So we can just stay tuned as the report and we hear more news. It's going to be a slow process, but there's going to be a lot of things coming. It is going forward, and it sounds like your prediction on X is that it's going to go back on appeal. And you made the predictions last time, Jack, about about Miller, and made the reference to Dr. Mudd. In our first or second show that we had. So yeah. So what are your predictions on the appeal? You made them on X, but why don't you speak about them now, and how that may relate to your predictions on Miller?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't have any great information on the timing of all this. I could have maybe figured that out, but it just at the moment wasn't important to me. Just watching it go through and all that is good enough for now. So I don't know the timing, but I would say that from my reading of Mellor's written judgment, there are a lot of contradictions, and there are a lot of problems with his logic, and that are obvious. And I mean obvious as in like a fifth grader would get it. But the world's the world, and if there's three more Mellors lined up at the appellate level, maybe he doesn't even get the chance to appeal. But I think it would be almost impossible for him to not be granted the right to appeal, because he's got substantial arguments based on what the evidence that was produced in court, and I think he's going to have plenty of them. And you just can't have all that outstanding stuff as a court and feel comfortable saying, we're going to let this guy be recommended for criminal prosecution, which is what Meller wants, and have him risk 340 years in prison, and just kind of ignore these many, many points that he's made where Meller was biased and unreasonable and didn't consider basic facts right in front of his face. So I think it's a little more serious than, say, I read the Kleiman appeal written by Ira's backers, and it was tiny. Like, they made like 1 point. And then, first they asked for a mistrial, and the judge was like, I don't think so. And then they made their appeal, and she took her good sweet time on the appeal. It was ridiculous. It took like 7-8 months or something. It wasn't even decided till last fall, right before this case was about to start. And she turned it down. It was like, it's too flimsy. And it was basically all based on her being unfair and all that. But she really wasn't. I think she was unfair the other way. And I don't think she had anything to do with the way the jury ruled that. And they didn't present good enough evidence that anything else was amiss. So it was really just kind of like, well, the judge made one mistake, Judge Bloom, and we didn't like that, so we want to appeal. And she was like, I didn't make a mistake, you're mistaken, and here's all the reasons why, and no, I deny your appeal. And then, that's as far as it went, and that's it. But this is totally different. This is like, Meller, says that all of my witnesses are frauds and crooks, and all of their witnesses are the super intelligent Bitcoin wonderful that would never once even bend the truth a little. And it's, there's so much area to prove both of those things wrong, that even just the potential that I think you have to grant the appeal. And if they don't grant the appeal, there's something wrong in England, right? Then all bets are off. I don't know what Craig would do. I don't know what anybody would do. I think it would be like, okay, it's time to declare war and do things the mafia, not the mafia way as in violence or anything, but I just mean like, okay, maybe I've always said Craig will never sign the coins ever for anyone. Even if they prove he's Satoshi, I don't think he will sign coins. I think he views that as private, but I think even that might go out the window. Much stronger chance of even that going out the window if he doesn't even get the right to appeal. And even if he loses the appeal, I think bets are kind of off, because again, I think his evidence is plenty. And I know a lot of people, even in BSV, don't believe that, because they're like, why won't he just sign? Or why won't he say something about the Genesis block? Why won't he produce something about the PGP key? Where's his credit card statement? All this stuff. And it's like, yeah, there's some stuff that would kind of change people's opinion for sure. But you have to understand that Craig doesn't think that way. He thinks in terms of this should be a standard identification case. And no identification case in past history common law would ever assign a signature as having any amount of proof to it, because any asshole can steal your PGP key. Any asshole can go into your house and find the notebook where you keep, I saw your video the other day where you're like, make sure you write down, or it wasn't you, but you had some people recommending like, hey, write down all your private keys. I don't do that. I take the risk, but if you do that, then you have just as much risk of somebody, the house cleaner, taking a photo of the little piece of paper you have written your private key on, and next thing you know, they can steal your money anytime they want. So I just think that the signature thing is overdone, and I think Craig wants to win this the right way, in a way where no one can challenge it. And no one can say, see, we just waited until you signed and that's what convinced us. And he doesn't want that, because they've already said it. Greg Maxwell and all these guys are like, even if he signed, our first question would be, what did you do with Satoshi? Did you kill him before or after you stole the keys? And they've already admitted that. So I think his strategy is correct. I think he's doing it the right way. I think he wants to win with a couple hands tied behind his back. I think he easily can win with a couple hands tied to his back, as long as the court acts fairly and doesn't, chase social media and talk to Artie Van Pelt's best friend lawyer before and after his decision. These things have reversed huge cases. I don't know if the audience is familiar with USA versus Microsoft, which is one of the biggest court cases in United States history, which was the DOJ, or the United States, sued Bill Gates and Microsoft to shut them down as a monopoly, Anti-Sherman Trust Act, and they lost. I think it was like 1999, right? The peak of the dot-com bubble. And here they are. They're going to break up Microsoft into pieces parts, like they did Rockefeller and Standard Oil. And so when they lost that, it turns out that, they found that the judge, similar kind of case, the judge had read the book Hard Drive. That's one of the first books I ever read as a kid about Bill Gates. And it doesn't, to me, it painted Gates kind of favorably, but to the judge, who, maybe had a political bent, or maybe he just didn't like small gangly kids from Seattle. I don't know, but he did not take kindly to the material in the book, and he made it known publicly that he had read the book, and that influenced his decision. And the damn book is, kind of like the thing that was written about Craig that he, said in court was mostly fiction. It doesn't count. You have to go through the evidence, and nobody brought the book Hard Drive into the Microsoft case evidence. It was never used. And so you can't rely on it, but the judge did. And you can't bring in a lot of stuff that Meller added in his written judgment. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't reviewed. It wasn't forensically examined. It was just wasn't even part of the case. And he used it. And just the use of the word technobabble is not really part of the case.
Yeah.
It's not an official court word or anything. That's just what BTC uses to create this fake environment of saying that Craig doesn't know anything, and that when he speaks these technical things that are, granted, some of them are hard to understand. I understand them perfectly, but that's because I spent 5 years, and you the same, learning about all these details about Bitcoin that most people won't listen to. But once you understand them, they make as much sense as, a guy telling you about a car part. And you're like, well, I don't know what a carburetor does, but if you know how the whole system works, you can figure it out and realize that he's telling you the truth when he tells you that it's in front of the engine block, but behind the, gas tank. And, it's not technobabble is the thing. The frustrating part is Mehl isn't qualified truly to examine technicalities on anything really, but certainly not Bitcoin. And furthermore, he ruled it out in the pre-trial hearing. He ruled out being allowed to talk about Bitcoin, BSV, and BTC's version of it, technically, to compare it to what Satoshi's writings were about it. That was a central part of Craig's case, and that was taken away from Craig's team in December. They ruled you're not even allowed to talk about it. So that's why Zemgal seemed kind of flimsy during the trial. It was because he was testifying on a subject he wasn't really an expert on. He's not a private signature expert. He's like a how Bitcoin works expert. And he, his testimony was 5% of what it should have been. He should have been a big part of Craig's team's offense, where they say, okay, simple stuff. Does BTC do microtransactions? The answer is obviously no. I mean, their fees fluctuate from anywhere from 50 cents to $2,500. That's not a microtransaction service. But Satoshi said in the white paper, it's a microtransaction business. It's small casual payments is what you're trying to achieve. And BTC doesn't do that. Satoshi never said anything about second networks and like Lightning Network to make the small payments work. He said it worked out of the box, and that it could scale to Visa size amount of transactions. Well, Visa does 2,500 transactions a second. BTC does 7. There's not even a remote similarity between those two. So that's what should have been argued. If I saw more than one person arguing for all the things that Craig argues about, SPV, big block, small casual transactions, small world network, and there's a whole, how the Merkle tree works and why it was implemented and why you don't need it if you're BTC. Furthermore, Merkle trees, the only time they give you a benefit is if you have a massive amount of transactions. So the fact that a Merkle tree is even in BTC is completely insane. It makes no sense at all. It's kind of like saying, well, grandma needs to get safely from point A to point B to the supermarket every day. It's about 2 miles. So let's give her like a little Volkswagen Bug, right? But, let's put a aircraft engine in it in case she wants to go the speed of sound, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So, like, from an engineering standpoint, you'd be like, nah, nobody would do that. But that's what BTC argues. So that should have been a large part of the trial and was completely ruled out. So for me, I think even if Craig argued just one point, like, hey, the big mistake Mehl made was when he said in the pre-trial hearing, I'm ruling out any technical talk of Bitcoin or BSV and BTC. And once he did that, that's enough right there for an appeal.
Could be enough.
He could skip all the other stuff and just do that, and that'd be enough for the appeal.
And just be remember, Jack, the file format case on the motion to dismiss already came back on appeal to the tribunal. Yep. So yep. That's within this same exact case. Now that's moot at this point because he's got to win this appeal, but he's already won that. That overturned. Now I think the big question I have is whether or not he can bring up this Edgar Hansen contempt judgment for the, it's not technically for espionage, but that's basically what it was, right? He's got all this stuff. He didn't return it to Enchain. They've got a contempt judgment. Is he going to be able to argue that on appeal? I mean, because Mehl wrote that Edgar Hansen was not a bad actor, and he
Yeah.
had, he cannot use Edgar Hansen as an alibi. He point fingers on Edgar Hansen. That's what Mehl said. That's just
I think the answer to me would be both yes and no. No, in that I don't know that you can just say, well, look, after the case occurred and after I ruled and after we looked at all the evidence, more evidence came out that Christian Auger Hansen's a criminal, and look, he just got put in jail or 10-month sentence, and then he's getting sued for other things. Yeah, that looks bad, and it certainly helps. The old famous thing you see in the movies, where like, make sure the jury erases that from their mind, erase it from the record, and jury, you pretend you didn't hear it. I mean, sure, in a in a theoretical cyber world, maybe that would work, but reality is reality. So judges are going to see that, and it will affect them, even though it shouldn't. But even without that, I think just because evidence was submitted to the court of what Christian Auger Hansen wrote, say Craig and Ramona at certain times, the screenshots that he posted, that evidence can be re-reviewed, and it can be put into a new light, where you say, okay, if you just don't be mellow and ignore what's right in front of your face, you can see things like, hey, this is not a screenshot of Craig's computer taken, by Craig's computer. This is a screenshot maybe taken by a camera, by like a CIA agent kind of camera, where you're taking a picture, or it could be taken as a screenshot from someone who's compromised your system. So like, I don't know all the technical ways you can discover that, but one of the things that's mentioned in the trial is that you can see from the screenshot that it's actually a Linux computer that's sort of the shell around what they're taking a picture of, and that is a mistake, probably made in haste, because maybe they had to act quickly, which I think they did, because I think when Craig produced new discs of evidence, Christian Auger Hansen went a little nuts. Like I don't know if you ever seen the old movie No Way Out with Kevin Costner, and he's like a Russian spy inside the Pentagon, and he realizes that they're onto him, and that there's certain things in motion where they're going to find out that he's a Russian spy, and they're going to basically kill him, give him the death sentence. And he throughout the whole movie, he's trying to figure out a way to get out, and he realizes there's no way out, which is hence the name of the title. And I think that's similar to what Christian Auger Hansen felt inside Enchain when he realized the jig was kind of up. Like, he started playing cards that he could only play because he knew he was on his way out. So that fairway brief that he wrote, he himself even admitted that he was writing that for months ahead of time. So he was already planning the coup back when and here's the thing about the timeline. He admitted to being gonna rat out Enchain and turn over anything that he could to ruin their day, while he was telling Craig who to pick as his counsel and forensics experts. So
Yeah,
think about this. Yeah.
That's a big deal I never considered before, Jack. The mens rea for Edgar Hansen, because if they can prove in this appeal somehow or show that this wasn't just Edgar Hansen, he was upset because he was fired, and he was pounding on the desk there with Matthews and yelling, and Matthews said it wasn't just that; it was going on way before. So his mens rea, his mental state, had been going on for how long? You're saying possibly? Was he writing his brief?
I think even he admitted that by at least June, if not earlier. I think it was from the start, right?
That's a huge deal, because
I think he went into Enchain trying to get the job, and he arranged a bunch of board seats for himself, which was obvious when you read the fairway brief.
Yeah, in
But
most
even he admits,
causes of action, you know, especially for criminal, you have to prove intent. Like it can't just be like, oh, accidentally, and I was mad because I was fired.
right.
No, I had. If that person was calculating that for a year or 6 months ahead of time, that is a very dangerous person.
Yeah, but
And
he's gonna argue, oh, well, I was just a whistleblower and I'm a very good guy. And it's like, all right, but your history doesn't show any of that, right? Your history shows that you're a really hard guy to deal with. Even when you're partners with someone, you kind of end up with all the chips on your side of the table and the other guy ends up with nothing. That's happened multiple times with him. Most of the entities he deals with end up bankrupt and in court with him suing to gain control of the company, or else pay me a big amount of money. So I think his style of corporate rating is the stuff you see in the movies, right? Like when you see it's ironic because the guys who actually kind of do-gooder corporate raters, like a Carl Icahn in some respects, those guys get the bad rep. The guy who constantly works on his rep is a guy like Krishnagar Hansen, because he really is going in there trying to just destroy the company as long as it makes him some extra money.
like a
Like
hostile takeover type.
more worse, more like a hostage situation.
Hostage takeover.
Yeah, like you're hijacking a plane is more like it. Yeah, he like I think the reason why he collects data, and I'm sure I would love it if he would release stuff on me, because I had a nice long dinner with him in California, in Los Angeles. I think it was what's the big fun hotel that everybody knows is a movie star.
W.
No, even like old school. Not the
Beverly Hills
Monorail.
Hotel.
The what?
Beverly Hills Hotel.
Beverly Hills Hotel. So yeah, like you know, he's doing the 5-star thing at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I bring my whole family in, and you know he's putting on a show, and but meanwhile, you know, he's literally even telling you to your face how he operates and that he tests people and he does all these weird things. And so in a way, he's charmingly honest, but that's like, you know, okay, so some people who just are charmingly honest, but he's one of those guys who gives you a nice taste of truth in order to get the big con on you, kind of, you know what I mean? And you know, I've had these conversations with some of the BSV startup guys, and you know, he may not have taken advantage of the startup guys, meaning like the founders, but he was definitely taking advantage of the investors of the founders. And that's what I was pointing out to like some of the guys who are running BSV startups. I was like, you know, you're going to make out fine because you're just going to end up with an extra $600,000 in your pocket that you can distribute to you and your buddies. But it's the investors that their investment goes to zero because he's taken over. And then also, you're not totally making out founder because he also wants one of 2 board seats or 2 of 3. And when he gets that, then you don't own your company anymore. You can own 99% of your equity shares. And if he has a board of 2 of 3, or even 1 of 2 is veto power, then you don't run your company anymore. You're not, you might think you're the CEO, but you could be overruled at any point. All he has
Yeah.
to do is change some bylaws, or even just, you know, he's the kind of guy that will write the bylaw. He'll rewrite your bylaws for your company and just say, yeah, just sign it. It's standard. Anytime someone tells you to sign a contract, it's standard. Make sure you read it, because that's the word for don't read it, because I'm putting stuff in there to screw you. And you know, that's the way he operates. And I always give people the benefit of the doubt, even if they're known crackpots or whatever, because you know, people can change, and it's rare that they change, but you always have to give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying you should hire these people, but I'm saying, like, in life, you know, it's good to not jump on people for things that you don't have a decent amount of proof or incentive, as you said, to know that they're operating in a foul manner. And I gave him that leeway, and I had several dealings with him, and they all turned out bad. So he took over tall and screwed over all the investors and gave them a shit sandwich. That was his first deal, and nobody even knew that he made that deal. But he took that into End Chain. He screwed Enchain because
Is he the one that took Tal from being public to private?
yep.
Oh,
Yeah, people don't know that, but that's true. Then because he was taking over, he was kind of de facto CEO at the point already. So he was bringing Tal into Enchain's coffers through a division or whatever. And with inside those divisions of some of these acquisitions that he would make, that's where he would set up the board seats. So like within Enchain, that's the part of the fairway brief that I believe he showed a lot of internal structure that's private and shouldn't be, broadcasted, but was. So I'm sorry, I can't help reading it. The guy sent it everywhere.
so Jack, what is going on with Calvin? We have not heard from him other than a couple little videos, that he makes there scripted. What's up with that? What's up with Calvin? I mean, any idea how he's doing?
I think Calvin isn't any different. In terms of the way he thinks about Bitcoin, I think Calvin is just changing his strategy. One thing Calvin, I think, just from watching him perform as a business owner, is he's very good at being able to change his strategy or get rid of a person when they're not performing. He has super loyal employees that are very good for him and have always served him well. And he tends to be very loyal to them and keep them around, and they're very loyal to him. But I think he just thought going let's show everybody that we have Satoshi route is not working. Now, I actually disagree with him. I think it's important. I think Craig is important, and I've always thought that. I think that it's important that he be recognized as Satoshi because I think it helps not just market BSV, but it helps people get comfortable. It helps people who are in finance and can finance startups and an ecosystem, which is totally needed in Bitcoin, especially since the companies have to be real and it's not just Ponzi schemes and selling bunnies with helmets or whatever the hell they do. It requires real investment, like serious investors. And to get serious investors, you have to have a story, right? I mean, you have to have a reason for them to get in, and they have to know what their odds are, and they can't think that it's like, oh, maybe in 20 years this will succeed. They need like what's the catalyst, for people taking this seriously? Because obviously right now they don't, right? I mean, BSV's, 25, $35. It's not being taken seriously. It doesn't go up with crypto. It doesn't participate in the rallies. It doesn't participate in all that altcoin baloney. So it's really a whole league of its own, and it needs its own marketing system that gets serious people in. And I think Calvin's decided that I've given, making Satoshi into a rock star, 9 years, and it hasn't worked. I think he's, making maybe the classic mistake of giving up on that strategy right as it might be about to work. And I think he kind of waited for the trial decision to come in and hoped that maybe that he was, not being too brash. And it, obviously the decision didn't go BSV or Craig's way. And I think that was kind of like, all right, change to a different gear, change to a different direction. We're still going to do enterprise and government, but we're just going to clear the decks on the Satoshi narrative, and we're going to go with the million transactions per second. And how do you argue with that? It's valid. Ironically, people that probably were really rooting for Craig probably just as much jumped onto that as anything else. The new strategy of, it's not a new strategy, but it's just changing your focus from, hey, check us out, we have the actual real Satoshi, to maybe you should check us out because we actually have a blockchain that works, which is true. I would argue that, the world's a weird place, and, timing wise, that those strategies could result in drastically different timelines of success. And I think it's funny, I don't think Craig or Calvin give too much weight to how fast things need to happen. I think Calvin wants to happen yesterday, right? Like, I think he had been surprised that by 2017, that Bitcoin Cash wasn't, trading well above where BTC was. And I think he's super frustrated, and he's put a lot of money in and a lot of time and effort and dedicated, good portion of his life already to making Bitcoin work. It's been a decade. And, there's some disappointment there, I'm sure. With Craig, I think it's more, he's got sort of the military general's perspective of, okay, I know everybody wants to like win the war and have not one casualty and we all ride off into the sunset and carry all the winners with us. And while that would be great, it's not realistic. And there's more bigger things at stake than the little division that went over there to fight, the skirmish next to the water or whatever. There's sacrifices that have to be made when you're operating at the top. And so you don't get to just please everyone. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't like Craig and they get mad when he, overpromises and underdelivers in certain respects, and some of that's not, most of that's not really his fault. It's COVID delays and, really bad actors. I mean, he can't control everything. So I think he's just a guy that's like, well, I get it, but there's a bigger thing at stake here with respect to identity and law and Bitcoin. It's really important for Bitcoin's long-term success.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think people are really missing it. Like Bitcoin is not an identity system, but it can be part of identity. And he wants to really demonstrate that with this case.
So where does that leave things right now with like the BSV world, because you're really involved in it, and as you said, the price was, what is it, $25-$30? I mean, I'm just so confused. They got Tether. They put more money. It was like somebody posted the other day. There was another X amount of millions or billions or whatever just put into Tether in one day. It was a huge amount, and then they've got massive amount of money going to Congress, printing regularly. So what could possibly, with this limited supply of BSV, what is it, 5 million liquid? I don't even know what's even available, but they say it's pretty
BSV
low.
or BTC?
Of BSV even available to buy. If a whale wanted to buy it, I mean, how much even is there to buy? Maybe 5 million, they say. I don't even know.
Yeah. So I think we were talking about this before we started, and I would say that one thing that people who aren't maybe with a background similar to mine that are in financial markets, and even those people don't know very much because they don't study down to the metal, how the trades happen and how the markets actually work and what does a prime broker do, what's the difference between, say, JP Morgan and New York Mellon Bank or Bank of New York or Pershing, and what do they do and what's settlement, and all these little details about how you go press your thing on what's the ridiculous app that you press your little button on Robinhood and you're going to buy one share of GameStop, right? Because you got whatever that price is, $30 on you that day because you didn't buy your coffee that day from Starbucks. I'm going to buy a share. And, what happens after that? Like, what does Robinhood do for a living? What don't they do for a living? Why does your trade end up with a zillion other trades from other people trying to buy one share of GameStop, and then it gets sent to Citadel? And what does Citadel do with it? Because that guy's a mega billionaire. He's not really in the business of helping you make money. He's in the business of helping him make money. So what does he do to your trade? And then, what happens overall in that market in terms of the buys and the sells and how it balances out? And, there's shorting involved. So who's borrowing shares to short against the little guy buying the GameStop? And what's that hedge fund doing? And that guy's not in the business of losing money. So he's betting against you and plans on shutting you out, right? He's planning on, 10 million of you buying one share, all drops and goes to him, and you give up and he makes money. So like, you got a lot of things against you when you're buying your little share on Robinhood that you're not even aware is happening. And some of it, frankly, it's not what you would think. I mean, I think people are getting that picture, but there are certain rules that do help. And things like not being allowed to naked short out in the open is one of them, right? And that's a very important law or protocol that a market has to have. And if it doesn't have that, it can be manipulated. And it's usually manipulated by a very large party, a very rich, large party, and they can move the price. They can cause you to have emotional backflips and talks with your wife and children about how your life's going to change because, daddy lost all of his money or whatever. Like that, these are big things. And that power to move prices without there being a fundamental reason via things like naked shorting, wash trading, they're super important that they cannot be allowed in a fair market. And it should be self-policed, right? It shouldn't take the government to come in and tell you that you can't cheat in the market, right? Every market participant wants a fair market, at least the honest people. And that's what you want to attract. You want to try to attract honest liquidity. So for instance, a lot of this came to the head in 2004 with a guy named Patrick Byrne at overstock.com. And he kind of had almost, I don't even want to say almost, he pretty much had incontrovertible evidence that his stock was being manipulated down, right? And that it wasn't participating in the dot-com explosion. And why is that? And he could account for all the shares, like you're trying to say right now, like there's only 5 million BSV out there. How could it not go up? And he did the same thing. In fact, he knew so many people that he had kind of befriended that was his investors. He had accounted for like, I don't know, something like 90% of the shares. And he would look and mathematically prove that it was impossible for the stock to go down that day. So how did it? And, and I hate to say it, but, the regulators and the people who were most responsible for these mistakes happening were big prime brokers. I'm talking like the big 5 banks in America that are part of investment banking. And the look was not good. And if it had gone to court, and I don't know how it progressed, I only followed a little bit of it, but had that gone to court and everybody had to show their cards, it was going to be a big controversy. Like, oh boy, the stock market's rigged. Like you can just make at some guy's desire or whim, you can just make something price go down. That's legal. Like, how is that possible? So I think they corrected it. They buried it. Right? You know what I mean? Like a slap on the wrist, bad prime brokers who knew exactly what you were doing. You can't do that anymore. But we're not going to send you all to jail. Okay, so, and Patrick Byrne's going to left the stew a little bit, but at least his stock will be released a little bit and he'll get a little bit of what he wants and everybody will be okay. And we won't cause this big controversy. They'll make everybody doubt the stock market. But honestly, what should have happened is it should have been opened up and it should have been brought to light and people should have went to jail and it should have been fixed. Because honestly, it still wasn't really fixed. There's still a little bit of hair of that dog in there. It's not as bad as it used to be. So you can't get away with it like you could have in say 2003, but it's not truly fixed. It's only partially fixed. And that's the stock market. And everybody trusts the stock market. But now the cryptocurrency markets don't even have those rules. Like CZ and Binance, it's not like they have a anti-wash trade rule. If they did, it would be a joke. Like almost, I would guess 99% of the volume they produce is complete and utter BS. It's just two computers trading the same thing back and forth a zillion times to make it look like there's all this activity there. And I think that combined with things like naked shorting where you can on BSV and then other tricks, it's just been held down. And it can continue to be held down. And that's what I've been trying to tell people for years. And that's why I don't get ever too excited about the price. Oh, the court case is coming, and if he wins, it's going to go way up. You'd be surprised. Like, I was telling Kurt the other day, he's like, well, yeah, but how come BSV sometimes goes up 100%, like in a short amount of time? And I'm like, well, the way wash trading and naked shorting works is it's kind of a longer term steady game. Like you can kind of push down under a light kind of normal everyday volume where people are just, buying and selling for reasons that aren't related to what's going on with the thing. But like when you report earnings, if you report great earnings as a company, that's an event that causes a lot of volume to happen quickly, a lot of buying and selling. And in short bursts, the price will react to fundamentals. So Craig wins his case. BSV is going to go up, right? Craig reveals that his bonded courier showed up on time in January of 2020. Price went from like 80 to 400 in a matter of 30 days. So when people concentrate their buying in a frenzy, that can overcome these manipulations. But notice, like, since the court case, it's just down, 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 and it's like no news is good news, and that's that manipulation where it's like, they're claiming that there's 10 million BSV traded that day. Really? How the hell did 10 million BSV trade today when there's only 21 million total? You cut Satoshi's part out and other lost coins and all this other stuff. Plus, like, who do you know that buys and sells BSV every day? I don't know anybody. I've been in BSV for 5 years. I don't know one day trader in BSV. They're all like, nah, I bought at this price. I've been holding it for 3 or 4 years. Or occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, I make a trade. But there's not 10 million shares a day of BSV traded like water. It's just BS. And so you have to ask, well, why? Why is that number printed up every day at OK Exchange? Or what are some of the other ones at Hyobi and some of these exchanges that have known shenanigans characters running them? Justin Sun, CZ, the Tether Boys ran Bitfinex, which even did BSV shorting for a while. Like, these are not friendlies. So if all that shenanigans is happening and we're seeing it come out, it's not like I'm telling you something new. I mean, Coinbase has the SEC on their ass, and they're supposedly the cleanest one. I mean, hell, when the government sells the recovered whatever it is, Mt. Gox BTC, they're moving it on Coinbase, which is ironic because the SEC is going after them for all this other stuff. So it's like, it's a dirty, dirty industry, and BSV is manipulated down. I hate to tell you, but I've seen evidence of it just on a short-term basis, like within a couple trading hours when there's a lot of volume going on. So I don't know what to tell people other than fundamentally things like the Orange Gateway Exchange coming out, which is kind of a BSV only. If they can take over real BSV trading, that's a great thing. Even if the volume is light, that would be real fundamental price discovery in BSV. And then I think your original premise that kicked this conversation off of, yeah, but there's probably only 5 million BSV even available if anybody wanted it. That could be like one guy buying that. And that's true. And I think once the trading becomes fair, which is totally possible, don't know the time frame, but once that becomes totally fair, you can see the fundamentals change on the price, and lots of good things can happen from there. And I think, one of the best things that can happen is they shut down Binance, right? I mean, government monitor is already supposedly scheduled for this year, if not like last month. And if that guy sees this watch trading, he should be asking questions like, what the hell is this? And why is it here? Tell me who the parties are.
So it sounds like there could be a light at the end of the tunnel for all those people who are in BSV. And but and with what you're saying there, with the Orange Gateway Exchange, honest trading in the future, it's definitely a long-term bet. I remember when I watched some of your podcasts a few years back, and you talked about, the long-term play and what was it? The tulip mania, some of the stories that you brought up back at that time, where everybody's they're playing the tulip, they're betting the tulips for as long as they can, but it's like, you just hope you aren't the last guy holding the bag, when the tulips pop, right? It's like,
right.
I mean,
what are you going to do with a BTC that isn't worth much?
Yeah. I
Can't
mean,
burn it.
yeah, it's the liquidity. So exactly. So, yeah. So what do people, I mean, what else are you up to, Jack? I mean, and what could, what are you doing, or what are you excited about? What are your goals here in this industry right now with what you're doing?
Well, I'd say along the lines of sort of price and appeals, the discussions, I'm just looking for a catalyst, right? And I got to be honest, I'm not really seeing anything other than the appeal. that's a major catalyst. I would love for, you know, a zillion transactions a second to be a catalyst, but I've been waiting 5 years on that. And, you know, show me an enterprise customer that's got more transactions than like hell anything, even Slictionary. So like where are these corporate enterprise adopters that are gonna, you know, use the hell out of real Bitcoin? You know, it's been a while waiting for just the one. We had a couple sounded like logical candidates a couple years ago, and it didn't work out. So, you know, is there news on that front? I don't know. I'm not privy to that. I'll try and make some calls here pretty soon to find out, because I'd like to know if there's positive catalysts. But so far, I haven't seen anything. I don't see why a government is going to all of a sudden pay much attention. They're going to hate the ruling, right? I think that guy, the IPv6 guy, Latif Hadid, he would love. I think his interests came after the Kleiman case was won, and he seems like a pretty serious guy running a pretty serious organization, and you know, he doesn't seem to be backing off, which is good after this loss in the Kleiman case. But people like him that are kind of observing from afar, like, is that the real Bitcoin? Is it? Like, maybe it is. And those people are kind of waiting for a catalyst. They're waiting for Craig to win the case. They're waiting for an enterprise to adopt it. They're waiting for something like a Slictionary or a little bit, or what's the social media one, that Tree Chat. They're waiting for some of these things to succeed before they get excited. And I don't entirely blame them. I'm more of the mindset that once you find the best tech, you go for it and you become the change in the world kind of guy. But I'm a realist, and I know that the smart money, they wait for a catalyst. They wait for something that can happen soon that's going to ensure that they win. And something like Craig winning this case would have been one of those things. So I think the appeal is super important to get some capital into BSV. Whether that comes through me or other people, I don't think it matters. You know, for BSV and Bitcoin success, it might matter for me, but it doesn't matter for Bitcoin. But I think it needs to happen. I think BSV is capital starved, and all the amazing things that it can do, we don't get to really see in their full glory. I mean, Slictionary is in a bad state right now because we have Google, our database provider, holding us over a barrel and essentially canceling us for a little while. I've been fighting them every day for several months now to get my site back. But, you know, that's the way the world works sometimes. BSV, had it developed a full database, you know, maybe I could have avoided the problem, but that came with lots of problems as well when you're on the bleeding edge of technology. So a good Bitcoin based database that could replace Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services. I've seen some decent attempts at it, some from the far past and maybe some that are more modern, but it's not something you'd want to have a bunch of investors gamble on yet, you know? So that either has to be built by a company like us that is going to incorporate it into our product, and that requires capital, or somebody else. So, but either way, it requires capital. It requires a bet on the future. So I think we need some catalysts, and I'm right there with them at this point. I've already made my bets, so I'm just sitting and waiting. And you know, to anybody that asks, I'm honest with them. I'm like,
when
if
you
I
say
if
you
I
made
could,
your when you say you made your bets, what would you mind telling a little bit more about what those bets are?
yeah, so I own some BSV and have since 2019. I don't trade it. I've maybe made a few trades several years ago when the price was haywire, but like, you know, I'm just a long-term holder waiting for a multi-year rise in the price, and my sell price would be very high, right? Before the odds would change. So I've got an investment there. I've got private investments in companies in the space. I think people are probably aware that I have that I formed a BSV only VC called Pi Zero One. We have a lot of investors that could be interested again in putting more money down. There's a lot of big money in our our uh, our group, but they want to see catalysts, right? They want to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And Craig losing the case and some of the failures that have happened along the way with Tall and some of the bigger investments that have been made, they're just not seeing it. Meanwhile, they sit around and watch Solana and BTC and Ethereum get what they ask for all the time. So it's tough to swallow to be a BSV investor. And I think BSV has to get to the point where Calvin isn't the only like buck in town. Like I think it's great that he is, and I really admire that he has incredible pluck, and I just would need 9 more of him or 90 more of him. But because of some of the things that have happened, they're just getting scared away, and some of them have been at the door. And then something goes wrong. There's a attack on BSV or whatever. There's just, in a way, BSV is the most professional digital asset out there, and there's 20,000 of them, and I would rank them number 1. And CoinGeek conferences ranked number 1 of all the conferences. I'd say CoinGeek coverage ranks number 1 amongst all the media companies. So there's a lot of things done right. But there is, in some important places, some lack of professionalism. Things like, how does this Christian Auger Hansen get in there when he has no good reputation going in, and then like the stuff he's doing along the way isn't looking right, and it's pissing people off, and yeah, okay, maybe it's good for Enchain, maybe not, but you're sending other investors away. Like, ugh. How did you get that guy in there? Like, that's your dude? That's the guy you want owning all the patents in the space? Like, I don't think your BSV thing is really very serious. So from my point of view, there's a lot of serious criticisms of BSV stuff that need to be, it's not too late or anything. I mean, it can be adjusted, but the lessons have to be learned. And in certain respects, things have to be doubled down upon. I personally think Craig's one of them. I think you have to support the guy, and he's, unfortunately, if you view it that way, he's the captain of the ship, and he's going to go up or down with the ship. So I think you got to support him.
One idea, Jack, that I'm going to just be transparent about and share with you and share with everybody, because it needs to be done, and it hasn't been. And that is, I met with, I know the guys at Script and the smart contracts really well. And so I've been in a bunch of meetings with them. I went to the conference there in London, and Owen Vaughn from Enchain, he put out a new product, which is basically like it's a concept where you've got different chains, BTC, Ethereum, Solana, and they can do cross-chain transactions without a third party. It's conceptual. It's not a live product. So I looked into it, and it's something that is a ripe business opportunity for an investor that would probably, it's a 7-figure business. I mean, to put something like this together. Cause I asked some of the engineers, and they said, that is a freaking, yes, it's conceptually been done by Script and Enchain, but it's in order to make it functional, it's going to take a serious business. But it's something that could be a huge catalyst if with the right long-term investor, with the right VC, with the right people behind it. So I'm just throwing it out there to you or anybody else who sees this video.
Would 40 million be enough to put into it, or 10 to 40 million?
I would think that would be more than enough. I mean, I would imagine, gosh, I mean, it's such a, I mean, but the benefit, right? It's like, you get rid of the middleman. You get rid of the Coinbase.
I'm being a little historically coy with you, because
okay,
there was a company called Fabrique that.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't solve the technology of swaps or whatever, but it was kind of the idea, like, let's make it really easy to go in and out of cryptos and BSV and all this other stuff, and it'll work really well on BSV, and the fees will be low, and all that's true, but you still got to have the customers, right? Like you have to have the, New Yorkers and Los Angelinos and Londoners and Frankfurters all coming in and being like, yeah, I need to get me some BSV, and Asians and all that stuff. They got to be there. They gotta have the interest to get into these big things, and then you can spend the 10 to 40 million. But like right now, honestly, Orange Gateway is brand new. It's out of Iceland. That's the best thing I've seen in exchange slash financial background infrastructure apps, if you want to even call an exchange infrastructure. But that's the best thing I've seen since BSV started.
Wow,
Right?
really?
That's the thing that I've been looking for. Like, hey, what if we had, in a very favorable financial regulatory environment, which Iceland provides, and Iceland's got a great financial history with the whole. They were the one country that actually let their banks go bankrupt and take their punishment in a financial crisis.
Oh
And
yeah,
so,
amazing story.
yeah. So they have a fiat and all, so it's not perfect, but that'd be my target country to get some of this stuff done. And then just by miracle chance, and maybe it's not miracle chance, maybe it's because they are really open. Some guy who just happens to be a BSV fan has built this exchange, and I think the shame of it is with this case is, look at it this way. I saw like 4 really cool things that have come out in the last 9 months that are really exciting to me. Like things that are built the right way, in the right structure, the way BSV is supposed to be used. And when I was, investing and had, contractual capital to invest with Pi Zero One, I would have loved to have seen these companies earlier because I would have invested in them. But like these companies like Little Bit and maybe Tree Chat to a certain extent, but especially Orange Gateway, and then there's a couple in Europe that are doing like Euro and Swiss based stable coins and stuff like that. And I think there's an exchange out of Europe right now, or Spain, or Gibraltar, or one of those places. The name just escapes me. I don't know why. I've talked to the guy a couple times. But those are really exciting developments. And the shame of it is they all seem to be timed with this court case, right? Like Little Bit came out middle of last year. Like it's like, hey, check us out. You can bet on sports and stuff and prediction markets. Like, what perfect timing it would have been had Craig won, right? Because then you'd be like, oh, this. Then you could go out and say, like, look at this thing. It's so cool. You can bet a half a penny on the golf match or something. Like, that's incredible. You can teach your kids to gamble if you want to. You can teach them about odds. That's what I'm doing with it. Like, I got my 13-year-old and I'm showing them how odds work, right? Because it's important in stock research. It's important in real estate. It's important in anything you invest in to know the odds and the probability. And those are 2 different things. And if you can learn that through betting a dime's worth of BSV on sporting events, I'm all for it. Like, because if anything, you'll learn that it's really hard to make money in the sports book arena. But if you apply these same principles to either real estate or stock research or something like that, that's more serious and worthwhile, then why not? Why not let them learn how to do that? And for small amounts of money, like a dime. And then Orange Gateway, like how long I've been waiting for an exchange to be BSV focused, where it's like, no, our sole goal is not to be like Ethereum and BTC, and we'll just make money from all these other cryptos, and then we'll treat BSV more fairly than everybody. Like, no, I want to see a BSV fiat exchange. I want to see a guy who's like, what my goal is? We can already do Euro to BSV. We can do USD to BSV. My next goal is the Icelandic kroner to BSV. And I love it when a founder tells me something that I already want without me asking. And that's what this guy told me. I forget his name. I think he got interviewed on Kurt's show.
Highland Thor.
Thor.
Yeah, Thor. Yeah.
You got to call him Thor, even though it's his middle name. But that dude's a great dude. Like, you talk to him and you're like, hey, man, what do you want to do next? He's like, you know what I want to do next? I want to put the Icelandic kroner on, be a fiat pair with BSV. And I'm like, hell yeah, man. The Icelandic kroner is the best performing currency in the world, thanks to the letting their banks go
Is
bankrupt.
it?
Yep. And it's it's a fiat. I'm not going to give it too much credit, but like it's the most responsible fiat, and that counts for something. So I think it's awesome that this Icelandic kroner, if BSV got its legs and it had a tailwind and everything, like it would actually boost Iceland a little bit. And I think that would be really cool. That'd be a nice reward for them for being the one country to kind of treat the financial crisis the way it probably should have been treated. Not entirely, not perfectly, but they did the best. So I would love to see them become the exchange nation of the BSV world. I'd love to be invested in them if it's going to work out. But again, you got to see some catalysts. And I think that's what I'm waiting for. But, with respect to Slictionary, that's my baby. That is really where I want to spend all of my time. I think it's the biggest thing that can be built on BSV. So think of it like, Google or Amazon did for the internet. I mean, I realize people don't understand it yet, and I don't really care if they understand it, but making information valuable in micro business chunks where you can own a word in the dictionary, you can own, the Babe Ruth section of a wiki.
No, I like the story. Yeah. I mean, what about the story I think you shared once about like saying the guy came over when New York started, and what was the family name? One of the family names, the famous family names. He owned a part of New York in Manhattan, and he could have bought in. You shared that story before.
JJ Astor.
Astor. Yeah. What was the Astor story in relation to Slictionary? That's a good one to tell.
No, Astor is more my. Well, yes, you're right. There is a relation to Bitcoin. It's
the Slictionary because he's buying.
My best example for showing people what a blockchain really can do is think of, say, 1/8 acre plots on the island of Manhattan as Bitcoin, right? Now, when the plot is empty, you can buy and sell that easily because, when there's nothing on a property,
cheap.
It becomes, what's the difference between this one across the street and that one? Not much, right? It's still an 1/8 of an acre on Manhattan, and then they'll trade about the same price. But what's the difference between the Empire State Building and the building that I first saw when I moved into my first apartment in New York, which is this little, I called it the old lady in the shoe. It was like this dusty old mansion that probably 200 years ago had a farm around it, right? It was one of the last standing buildings, and they raised it and they put up a 100-story building with United Colors of Benetton occupying the basement. And the Yankee Jason Giambi lived on the 60th floor, and you'd see him all the time. Anyway, like the old lady in the shoe property compared is something on the property, and so is the Empire State Building, and those have completely different valuations. The Empire State Building is going to be, worth $3 billion or something. The old lady in the shoe place, maybe they buy that for 50 million because the land is so valuable, but the house isn't worth shit, right? It's a tear down. So like the land's worth more than the 50 million you pay. It might be worth 60 because it may cost you 10 to get all the zoning to get the old lady in the shoes like cat piss out of the environment without killing anybody and hurting the tree huggers. So like the land has more value than the transaction because the house has a negative value, and that's information on the coin, right? Like a good definition that's written by Michael Jordan that describes the definition of basketball. That's like the Empire State Building. That coin might be 1 Satoshi, but it's got Michael Jordan's signature only written once definition of basketball on it, and you own that like you own the rights to a movie, and it earns cash flows. As people look at it, you generate money. And so that's a real financial asset, or more of a collectible asset, but it has a cash flow like a museum piece, like people going to see the Mona Lisa. But the empty Bitcoin is just like a gold coin, or it's like an empty lot in Manhattan. And so you buy that knowing that the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and the hotel guy, and all these guys are going to build on top of your land. They're going to put something important on it and make the land even more valuable. And you don't spend the coin that has Michael Jordan's signature on it, right? Because the signature is worth more than 1 Satoshi. So that gets HODLed. And I think people are kind of catching on to this. Like I'm watching them. I feel like I'm like 10 moves ahead. I don't have the capital I need to get further, but like I'm watching people go, oh, you know what? We should put our tokens on a Satoshi instead of no Satoshis. And I'm like, how did you not come up with that 5 years ago? Like, what have you been doing? Like, of course it has to be on a Satoshi. Otherwise, it's not even on Bitcoin. It's a waste of time. And furthermore, if you put things on 0 Satoshis, which means it's not really on a Bitcoin, you're not taking up space in the $21 million asset. So you're not making the price go up. So those kind of people are like, oh, I want price to go up. But then they don't realize that using 0 Satoshis for their tokens doesn't help the price at all, which doesn't support the commodity, which means that nobody wants to invest in it. So it's like, to me, it's completely obvious. And then they're like, oh, well, now we have 1 sat ordinals. And it's like, okay, now you got to get to the next step, which, well, what if you used more than 1 sat ordinals? And what if you made the information permanent on the coin and only controllable by the owner? So Gavin owns the definition of podcast or what have you, because he knows it really well. And so you want this ownership concept where, yeah, I might own the land or whatever, but and it's open and we can trade that like money, but we want to trade the information as well. And so I think that's a huge concept that unfortunately isn't getting built properly. We were getting really close. We were having great success selling what we called celebrity definitions. So we had Daniel Kraywitz define
Hyper-Bitcoinization.
which he
Yeah.
invented the word like out of nothing. I mean, he tells a great story about how he formed the word, but it is his word. And it is now in, I think, I don't know, there's about over 24 dictionaries out there that are online, and it's in at least 2 or 3 of them now. It's in Slictionary as well, but we have the original written by the author. Nobody else has that. So I think that's unique, and that's a collectible, but also it's a money generating asset. So when people want to go, hey, what's the definition of Bitcoin? Well, you can maybe go to like, words.com or something and find out, what they think it is, written by some English professor. Or you can go to Slictionary and go, oh, this one's written by the guy who first coined the term, literally coined it and figuratively coined it. That's cool. Like I'll pay a penny. I'll pay a penny to see that. That's like,
that is cool.
I would call Slictionary the greatest.
That would be a reason for people to go check out Slictionary. They can find out what the definition of Bitcoin is from the actual.
Now you can't, because Google won't let you. They're trying to cancel us. But once we get it back, and I'm pretty confident we will, we're going to keep building on it. But the last piece to the exchange was letting people trade those definitions. So you should be able to say, hey, owner, contact the owner, look up the definition for hyper-Bitcoinization. And there's a guy who's really cool that's a friend of Daniel's that ended up being the highest bidder in the auction. I think he paid almost $200 for it.
Yeah, kind of like GoDaddy, where they're bidding on it on websites.
Yeah, and that's kind of what people want to invest in anyway or speculate in is like, but ours is much cooler because ours comes with a cash flow. So when you own a hyper-Bitcoinization definition and people do come in, you get a cut of every penny that comes in. If 100 million people a year look that word up, you could make hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more.
I mean,
so that's the concept.
What was it like back in the day when, do you remember when they were actually starting on those websites? Like, let's say, for example, X.com. Apparently, when Elon Musk was doing PayPal, he must have bought an X.com, at that time, apparently, because he's got X.com. Do you remember those days? Like, hey, wow, here's a cool website, X.com. Maybe we should buy that. Oh, no, it's not going to be worth anything.
Those days aren't even over. I don't even think you can buy 2 English words in a row, .com right now without paying extra money. So those same shenanigans are still going on today. Hasn't stopped. He paid a lot of money for X.com. My old investment firm had a name that they wanted, .com. They had .net forever. And I think like some telecom company owned it and they never used it. It was a standard kind of dictionary word. And they finally got it. It took them like 15 years to buy it because they refused to overpay for it. So When it went out of style, I think they finally bought it. But yeah, that stuff's been still going on. And I think when you do that for something that's never been traded before, we know the value of books. We know the value of music. We know the value of poetry. We know the value of newspapers and magazines and even pictures and art. But we don't know the value of something like, who owns your favorite joke? Who owns the best definition of basketball? Who owns these things? And why should, why should Merriam-Webster's own all the words in the dictionary? Why shouldn't we have partial ownership and people trading those things like buildings and lots in Manhattan? It should happen. It would be, not only is it good and fun, sort of what I call a micro business that can create a whole new ecosystem of people that run businesses that do these things, but it can also, it also good for the actual product itself. It's good for the dictionary. It's good for the readers. It's good for the knowledge seekers. When you have a Wikipedia that, instead of accepting all this weird money from people with political aspirations, if instead the ownership of the information truly was democratized. And I mean, hey, I'm just Jack Pitts. I run the platform. I run a fair platform that's kind of like also written in stone. There's certain things I cannot do to you. I'm not going to cancel you. Your thing needs to be economic. You can be a complete nut job like the KKK, or you can be a completely reasonable, Einstein. It's not up to me. I'm just the platform. But those people should control their bits of information on my platform as owners. Just like, Manhattan might set up the rules of what you can do with buildings in Manhattan so that, planes can still fly around and cars can still drive through it. And there's certain rules that need to happen to make the place orderly. But aside from that, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, whatever you can make a business of and put down a plot of land, you should be able to do that. And that's kind of what I want to do for information. And I think Bitcoin is this incredible product that can make all that happen. And it pains me to no end to see no capital coming in. I'd be happy. I wouldn't be happy. I'd be pretty pissed if someone stole my idea, but I still think I can outcompete them. But I'd be so happy if someone would do a business similar to mine and take that full concept, get the capital, find the users. And I'd love to do that myself, but it's just really hard to do. You got to have some tailwind. So BSV needs some tailwind. And, the court case is one of those things that can give it to it.
Yeah, so there's a call to action there. That's just to bring up, more tailwind and more momentum to this business and this entire industry right now. So hopefully I think we're doing our part here by getting the message out there, like on shows like this, Jack. So it's, we're about 90 minutes. I'm going to probably call it a wrap right there. So any final words here before we wrap that you want to leave us with?
I would just say, my experience with things like stock picking and research on companies and everything, there's this period you can hit where you just think, God, is there anything going right? And that period where it's like, man, there's nothing going right. Like everything's going wrong. That's actually almost a good thing, right? Because when you see that and you still know that your tech is the best and that there's a great story there, but just no one's paying attention and it's all going wrong. I'm not saying that's the time to invest in anything, but I'm just saying in terms of your mental state, you should almost realize that and go, God, I've never been more depressed about Bitcoin than I am right now. And here I am 5 years down the line, or some people are even 10 or 15,000 years down the line, waiting for this thing to happen. And it's like right when all the hope kind of boils out, it is usually a time to get bullish in terms of there'll be a catalyst that you don't even, I don't even know what it is right now, but there'll be a catalyst coming that can surprise you and happen even though you least expect it. And I think, just take this case, for instance, I think everybody deep down in their heart is like, I think he's going to lose this appeal too. It's like you want him to win, of course, but you're like, man, well, I thought he was going to win the last one and he lost that. And he lost in Norway, and they're like really kicking his ass and these like forgery allegations, and now it looks like he's gonna go to jail and he's gonna be a criminal. And it's like right then and there where you're like, there's almost nothing else that can go wrong. He's already being recommended for 340 years in prison. Whether he goes to prison or not is almost irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant to him, but I'm saying like it's almost irrelevant in the scheme of what is the next catalyst. Because guess what? There's many more people out there that think Craig's going to prison than don't. And so if he goes to prison, it's like a minor victory at this point for all his enemies. But if he doesn't go to prison and he gets an appeal, and he wins the appeal, any one of those three are all up, and up, right?
Yeah.
So when you're addicted to drugs or something and you can't do any more because you've already done the world's worst thing to your favorite person, like you've hit rock bottom, as they say, there's only one place to go, and that's up.
That's up.
That's right.
That's pretty much where we are. So that leaves us on a good positive note. I think that's absolutely, and for some whatever reason, I just see nothing but bright, in the future. And I just got nothing but like excitement and like really joy on this. This is a long-term thing. And I'm just like, I'm more bullish than ever. But maybe I'm looking at things. I look at things on the bright side, so I'm an optimistic person in general, and I just see it as beautiful. So I'm really excited to have you, Jack, and hope you have fun out there in Jersey Shore.
Yep.
Don't catch a sunburn out there or any of those. While you're having fun with your kids, man. So
I gotta say, listen, I'm glad that you feel that way because in terms of the bullishness, because I think that's what is needed. Somebody needs to be like, you know what? I don't even know what you're talking about, bear story. That everything is going well.
yeah,
That's
that's
good
how I
news.
see. It seems like it's going incredibly well, but I'm looking at it from a little fresher perspective and just the amazingness of the technology and companies like Senti and Bernard and stuff they've done. I mean, it's just amazing, So, hey, well, let's do it again sometime, Jack. Enjoy your summer. All right.
All right.
I'll see
Take it
you
easy,
at
Gavin.
the
Good talking to
top.
you.